we are not looking only at the issue of Palestine to be free from the occupation. We want to work for justice everywhere. As Martin Luther King says, any injustice anywhere is a fringe on justice everywhere.
My guest today is Zoughbi Zoughbi, the founder and director of the WIAM Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center. WIAM is located in the Palestinian city of Bethlehem in the West Bank. WIAM was founded to help resolve internal conflicts within the Palestinian population, as well as to help foster international dialogue. Zoughbi earned his master's degree in peace studies and conflict resolution at the Notre Dame University in Indiana, United States. And he's married to an American woman and they have 4 children. Unfortunately, his wife is prevented from living with him in Palestine, and their 32-year-long marriage survives only by way of her abbreviated visits. In fact, she was about to be deported just 2 days after our conversation was recorded, and she was. A bit of explanation is needed for the uneven flow of the conversation, which took place this last Thursday and Friday, January 26th and 27th. On the first day, 9 Palestinians were killed by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank city of Jenin, just hours before we started speaking. And I wasn't aware of it, but violence was erupting across the West Bank. And tear gas was seeping into his office during our conversation. He continued on, but the internet did fail several times and was unable to record his responses. I was able to, we started again on Friday, and I was able to piecemeal together our recorded conversations to produce this podcast. But neither of us knew at the time that yet another tragedy was about to unfold, as a few hours later, a Palestinian shot and killed 7 actually, Israelis who were praying in a synagogue on Friday night. And so the violence continues, and Zoughbi continues his work in nonviolence as well. And he never gives up hope or gives up faith that eventually Palestinians will be able to live freely under self-rule and peacefully with Israelis, as neither people is going anywhere. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with myself and Zoughbi Zoughbi. Hello, Zoughbi. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. Zoughbi Zoughbi. I can call you by either name, correct?
Yes.
I must also ask about the family first. So your children, your wife, how are things?
My children and my wife send their greetings to you and all the people who listen to us, and wishing you a good time and hopefully better time this year than before. And for the whole world to see an end of conflict and wars and occupation, and to move forward and to see once and for all the arms of dialogue to replace the dialogue of arms.
The arms of dialogue to replace the dialogue of arms.
Yes.
That's a very powerful sentence.
We pray and we hope and we wish and we work.
I wanted to say that it's so comforting to see you and to know that you are still out there working for peaceful resolution and working to bring peace and end of conflict. But I'm calling you on a day where it turns out is one of the most conflicted days in probably the year in West Bank. So we'll get into that, but I'd like to start by beginning at the beginning if we can, and we'll work up to what's going on today. So you are the founder and the executive director, I think that's still your title, of the WIAM Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center, which I love the word transformation. That's not usually thrown in that sentence. It's usually conflict resolution, not conflict transformation. So actually, maybe you could start by why you named it that. Why you named it the transformation.
Yes, thank you. And it is great to be with you after a long time.
Thank you.
I haven't
Very
seen
long
you
time.
for a while.
Nope.
We decided to change the name from resolution to transformation because we want to transform the lives of people and not only to resolve the conflict. And here I'm talking about internal problems, domestic violence, more than the issue of occupation. Although we like to transform the relationship after liberation and throughout the struggle, but at this moment, transformation is much more mature word that leads to better relationship among people and to lead to create innovative solutions to the situation, and not only to think that, okay, the conflict is settled, but to go beyond that. That's why I choose the word transformation.
I love that. I love that. It's so much more powerful. And like you say, mature. Well, let me back up a little bit and talk about, I think listeners and viewers may not have any idea where you are or what's going on. So you are located in the beautiful, much beloved city of Bethlehem in Palestine in the West Bank. And you started this organization back in 1994, which was a pivotal time, or meant to be a pivotal time in Palestinian history. This is the second attempt at having a conversation with Zoughbi. We started yesterday. Yesterday was an incredibly violent day in the West Bank, Palestine, in particular in the Jenin refugee camp, where 9 Palestinians were killed by Israeli soldiers, another one in Jerusalem. And I was slightly aware of that before our conversation started, but then as I was speaking with Zoughbi, I found out that there was violence going on, an uprising, and a lot of things happening as right then, even in Bethlehem, where he is located. So our internet was stopped, and we had to resume today. So we're kind of picking up a little bit from yesterday's conversation, and just to start by addressing that situation, if you wouldn't mind, I will tell you that most listeners, many listeners and viewers of this podcast are not familiar with the situation in Palestine. So we'll just talk a little bit about, the idea was to speak more about your work in conflict resolution, but this is so important that I want to start with what's going on right now in Palestine. So if you can just tell me what happened yesterday around Bethlehem and how things are today, and then we can move into the rest of the conversation.
Like every day, the Israeli troops invade areas, take people to prison, especially young people and children, demolish houses, confiscate land, and of course, in this process, some people died, killed, wounded, and some are imprisoned. And what is happening also between Jerusalem and Jericho, the Israeli troops trying to demolish the community houses and centers, schools of Al-Khan Al-Ahmar, which is a village or a community which lived there after they were kicked out from the Negev, came to live near Ma'ale Adumim, before Ma'ale Adumim, the site of this settlement. People were there living, then they cleared them off to other place, and
moving
so
again.
Israel would like to have more settlers in E1 to connect the settlers from Southwest Bank to Northwest Bank to E1 area, which is between Jerusalem and Jericho, by ethnically cleansing the Palestinian presence in these areas. So, and of course, around Bethlehem, there are more settlements building, there are more confiscation of land, there are more lack of freedom of movement, and there is no geographical continuity between different parts.
No, what continuity?
Geographical
Geographical. Okay.
continuity
Right.
between
Sure.
south, north, east, west of
Right.
Bethlehem area. Israel is
Swiss
in
cheese.
control of 87% of Bethlehemite area. The governorate of Bethlehem, 87% is under the Israeli control, whether for settlements, whether for bypass roads, whether for the wall, and of course, there are at least 23 settlements around Bethlehem and 25 outposts surrounding Bethlehem. So, to rule out any possibility of any viable community living together and having their own freedom on their land. So this is a small picture of what is happening in the West Bank.
And has been for some time, several years. And, this morning, a lot of people are talking about Palestine today on the news and in society here because of what happened yesterday, because of the huge spike in violence. And in fact, this morning on CNN, there was an interview with the, I don't know her exact title, but the head of Amnesty International about the report that they came out with calling this the state of apartheid. And it was interesting that today that they were spent maybe 10 minutes interviewing someone, the head of Amnesty International, about the report, saying that it is not just a violation of civil rights, but actually a state of apartheid, which of course many people have said for many, many years, but the situation continues to deteriorate to the extent that it's hard to argue that it's anything else. So to back up and talk about, you are the founder and the executive director of WIAM, the Conflict Transformation Center, Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center in Bethlehem. You're a Christian. You are embedded. Your family's been, I think, in Bethlehem hundreds of years. Is that right? I know. Yes. I read. Yeah. And you're married to an American woman, and you have 4 children. And you started this center in, I think, 1994. Yeah. Yes. Can you talk about what was going on then? Because it was a much different time. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of your opening and of the Oslo Accords, and I think that's about the time when you started. So, what was going on? What were you doing prior to that time before you started as a career, or if you're working in conflict resolution? And then why did you start the center specifically?
I have been activist working with the community since I was a younger student at the high school. And I was involved in 5 spheres, I would like to say: sports, mediation, and I was as peer mediator for
in high school.
At high school. I was working, I was a student, and I was in sports. And, I was working between the legs of my elderly, so I learned a lot about mediation.
Okay.
And from an early age at the high school, I was elected in the student government and then in the university level. So you could say from early age, I was community organizer. And of course, I am member of 8 siblings. My father died when I was 6 years old. My younger sister was 3 months old. So this gives me a different image of the society. And thank heavens, after my father died, I had a very compassionate mother, very loving mother, who would like us, and she succeeded, investing in education, investing in community building, investing to belonging to the land, and to care for others. So, and I learned a lot of compassion from her and empathy. So I was raised in this loving atmosphere, a loving mother, very dedicated, very committed, and a larger family, and of course, a bigger community. So this pushed me to do a lot of things. And my mother taught me a lot of nonviolence and how to resist without using violence, without hurting others.
You learned
And
that from
I
your
learned,
mother. That's interesting.
yeah, and I learned a lot from my elderly. Yes, my father passed away when I was young, but I have other brothers
Sure.
who are older than me and other relatives who are, of course, older than me. The ways of mediation and to be part of the community and to be involved in the community at a larger scale. We'd like to
Okay.
see, to say happy with those who are happy, to mourn with those who are mourning. So I belong to the society.
Yeah.
And later on, when I was graduating, I graduated from the university. I thought, I had different jobs. One of them is to teach at the local school. I was not allowed to teach in Bethlehem area because the Israeli occupation didn't allow me, even fought against me to have a job at a private school. So I was able to find a job in Jerusalem. At that time, the private schools are not controlled by the Israeli, security. There was a way to be in teaching there. And then I was working with Middle East Council of Churches, as well as Middle East Witness, which is a parallel organization to Witness for Peace in Nicaragua. And it was founded by FOR, American FOR, Fellowship of Reconciliation.
Okay.
So then I couldn't go to Jerusalem because the Israeli government didn't give me a permit. I founded a center called WIAM. WIAM in Arabic means agape, unconditional love. So, yes, I love to teach, but I couldn't teach in the West Bank. So I invested more in the work that I used to do voluntary in peer mediation, in mediation, in community building, in organizing the community, in creating healthy atmosphere, invest in the relationship among many members of the society, regardless to their faith, regardless to their political association, regardless to any kind of affiliation. And
So what year did you graduate from college? Do you remember?
yes, 1985.
85. So, just so anyone listening would understand, this was prior to the time there was any self-determination. We'll call it self-determination for Palestinians, because prior to the 1994 Oslo Accords, there was full occupation in the West Bank, and I understand there's still full occupation, but structurally, at that time, you were under full 100% occupation, but you were still not able to go to Jerusalem. And I don't understand why wouldn't they let you teach? Like, who is teaching in the public schools
or
like,
private schools? I believe they were screening us, and they think since I was a student activist at Bethlehem University and at high school, I don't know, they didn't allow me to teach, although I was summoned by different school administration to do. In the government-run school, we couldn't do it because it is automatically under the military occupation. Private schools have some kind of freedom, but at that time was not able to teach in one school. So I went to Jerusalem, and I found a school to teach called Dar al-Tifl, which was founded to house students who are orphans from Deir Yassin massacre.
Oh,
You know, this
yeah, I
is the
know.
foundation of it by Miss Hindul Husseini, God bless her heart. But then
Mm-hmm.
I was there at the time in the 80s, from 85 to 87 almost. Taught a couple of years in
Intifada.
Jerusalem. And then I went to University of Notre Dame to do my master degree in peace studies and conflict transformation, conflict resolution at that time
In the United
in the
States,
United
University of
States.
Notre. Yeah.
I came back in 1990 uh, to prepare, I engaged to my wife now, it was at that time, and to prepare for the wedding after I got my degree. But when my fiancée came to Palestine, she found me in the prison. I have been in prison several times. This is under
I
the
didn't know that.
British
Yeah.
administrative detention. It's not a lot of time. This is according to the law, which says every Palestinian is guilty until proven innocence. So they will round us around the end of the year because they are afraid that we will be active. And when I
What year
say
is
active,
this?
maybe writing graffiti, taking part in
Um,
demonstration, distributing leaflets, but they didn't file a charge against me. So I
mm-hmm.
spent from time to time there. And when my wife, my fiancée at that time, came to see me, I was in Dahiriya prison, and so anyhow, to make the longer
Yeah.
story short, I was released after a while, after many interventions, after lawyers, after
Mm.
human rights organizations, because they couldn't prove anything. And I was caught in the Hesha camp with two other Americans. One was teaching peace studies at Manchester College, which has been a brethren college, where the professor was my wife now,
Mm-hmm.
or fiancée at that time, teacher, and another woman from California. They found us in a refugee camp called Dehesha. They took
Mm-hmm.
us all to prison. The two American flashed their passports after we were in the jeep. They released them, but they took me to Dahriya, and then they moved me
Mm.
to Russian compound prison in Jerusalem, Al
My
Far'a
goodness.
prison in Nablus. But I was also a frequent visitor to the prison during the period when I was younger, under administrative detention. And this
Mm-hmm.
administrative detention that the authorities could take you from 4 days to 6 months, renewable to 5 years without any charge. So, and one third of the
Has
male,
that changed? Yeah.
and one
I mean,
third,
that hasn't really. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
one third of the male population of
Mm-hmm.
Palestinian men have been in prison, which is under the law called British Emergency Regulation Laws of 1945. When the British mandate left us, they nullify it, but the Israeli government became more British than the Queen, and they kept it.
All
But
right.
anyhow, that didn't stop me from being active. And then I had a job, as I mentioned, with the Middle East Witness, with the Middle East Council of Churches. And I was able to go to Jerusalem despite the Gulf War at that time. But later on, I was not allowed to go to Jerusalem. I don't have a permit. And since I was a volunteer in these areas before I founded WIAM, in 1994, I decided to found WIAM and to work in this church-related organization.
So when you founded it, what was the basis? I mean, it was a pivotal moment, right, in history, because all of a sudden things were changing in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, so that theoretically, there was supposed to be a 5-year interim after the Oslo Accords that were signed in '93, saying that there should be self-rule within certain limited areas. Bethlehem is one of those areas. Like, for example, where you are right now, you're located in area
A. but my office
which is
in Area C,
the, oh, your office is in Area C. I didn't know
next to the
that.
wall. And,
Yeah, I've been there many, many times, but I did not realize that was Area C. So before we get too much into the weeds for areas A, B, and C, I just wanted to say so that you started. What was the impetus right then to start it at that moment?
because
Was it
I
because
emerged from the student movement, and I thought if we are able to organize our people, especially the youth, it will be much more hopeful for a better society,
outcome?
for a better community, for future might be based on justice, activism, and separation of the three powers, you know? And also,
The three powers. What are the three powers?
later on when I started to have a Palestinian Authority, the three powers is the executive, power, judicial
Oh,
power, and legislation power, you know.
oh,
And
three
the
powers of the
whole
government.
idea establishing the center is to empower the civil society, walk and talk, to invest in youth, in leadership, to empower women, walk and talk, to have gender sensitivity approach that, yes, we are looking and struggling to have liberation, but we would like to have gender justice too, and would like to have justice on all levels among our society. We were not only struggling against the occupation through nonviolent techniques and skills, but also to invest in a society that will be void of violence, void of conflict, that will resort to peaceful resolution of conflicts, because we are not also angels. We have our own challenges internally, and to work with children, because we thought from the early beginning lots of children have traumas nowadays more than before. And as you know, there is no post-traumatic stress disorder. It is an ongoing trauma, layer after layer. It is a current one. And what we decided to work on trauma coping and not trauma healing, because again, we don't have the post-traumatic stress disorder. So from the beginning, we work with women, kids, youth, advocacy, as well as in mediation.
So there's three areas that you mentioned that I know that you focus on, that I just wondered if you could speak to each one just a little bit individually. And that is, as you mentioned, gender violence, nonviolent resistance, and international diplomacy. If we can just kind of drill down on those three. I'm curious about gender violence, first of all, because you have you empower women. Is this a particular problem in your community with gender violence, or is it the same as it is anywhere else in the world? I mean, we have it here in the United States as well, obviously.
That we have more domestic violence than before. At the time when we started, and now it is increasing, and during COVID it was skyrocketing.
As it was in many places around the world.
Yes.
And insular setting.
We try to address that, to address the domestic violence at large. And also, since I was raised by my mother and elder brothers, and my mother has a lot to impact me, one of the backbone of our work was the woman empowerment. And not only resolving conflicts and defending the woman's right, especially with inheritance. In our society, patriarchal society, farmers' mentality, even now there are not any more land for farming, but at that time, because they would like to keep lands in the name of the men at that time, of the sons, they try to find a way to not let the woman take their inheritance. Second, this is part of the displacement of anger. when Palestinians are not
Right.
able to go to Jerusalem to work or find a decent job and humiliated by the Israeli soldiers, and many of these soldiers are kids, 16, 17, 18, they go back to their homes, displace their anger on their wives, on their children, on their sisters, on the weakest society. So
Right.
we emerged to empower the woman, talk and walk, and also at early age, even we don't have lots of resources, we're able to help in finding jobs through our networking. And we were thinking of women economic empowerment at early age to find job for women, to do some work, offices and outside. So, and we focused on three things when we talk about women and gender issues: on UN 1325, which talks about Security Council 1325, which talks about women,
Security.
peace and security, and we work nowadays in different corners of the West Bank, especially in marginalized areas in the south or the north, in Jericho, everywhere we reach. Then we talk about CEDAW, the Convention on
What is that?
Elimination of all discrimination against women. And the third one, try to lobby and to entice our local government to accept and legalize the family protection law.
The local government, meaning
Palestine.
like the mayor's office in Bethlehem, or in all of
And
Palestine?
all with other NGOs, with other
Okay.
women organizations, with other
Okay.
human rights organizations, together to meet with the
Okay.
Women Ministry of Justice, to work to accept and to legalize and the family protection law. So we were there. So we have the walk and talk. Whenever there is violence against gender, against women, we go to the streets with other organizations, whether in Bethlehem or go to Ramallah, or and to be part of networking with other 18 women and development organizations. We also network with churches like the Anglican Church, the Lutheran Church, Catholic Church, advocating that to defend the women's rights and to defend people's rights in general, not necessarily only women, because when we talk about violence, it hits hard the core of the family, men and women, but usually
Yes, and children.
women and children are the victims of violence.
Yeah, right. Can people come to WIAM can women and children, or even men, come to WIAM if they themselves are experiencing violence,
Yes.
gender violence in
They
particular?
come to
They can
us,
come for protection.
and we also have outreach program. And sometimes they prefer not to come,
Okay.
but to call us to their
Yeah.
homes, to their places. So we go. And
Okay.
sometimes it is a private psychosocial counseling, or it will be part of the community. If there was an attack on women in public, we deal with it in public because safety in numbers.
That's really
But also
good.
we offer
very
psychosocial
powerful.
support, and we network with different groups, with different NGOs, with different church-related organizations in empowering the woman and move forward.
Okay, and let's just, in the interest of time, because I want to invest in all of these areas, but let's turn, if we could, to non-violent resistance, which I think was maybe one of the earliest reasons for forming WIAM. And I know that you've said personally when I've been there, and as well as I think it says on your website, that your actual presence there at WIAM, with having a garden, with having classes, with having workshops, with having international visitors, so many people. Every time I've been there, I've seen people from all over the world come to visit. That having, and to talk about peace and conflict resolution, and that just by your very being there, right under the separation wall, is a form of nonviolent resistance. You're demonstrating peace, you're demonstrating reconciliation, and you're doing it under the physical presence of something that
Excuse me.
represents quite the opposite. Bless you.
Yeah.
So,
Nonviolence
so you're
is not only a strategy for struggle, but also is a way of life. We are surrounded by violence. We are under violent occupation, whether on the personal level or the family level or the community level or on the national level. And for me, when I talk about nonviolence, is the way to struggle, as well as I was brought by my family to continue in this less traveled road. And that doesn't mean the Israeli security will not hurt people who actively involved in nonviolent struggle, or what we call it, unarmed struggle. And many of the young people and kids who are in prison is a result of their struggle nonviolently. And I tell you, from the late 18th century and 19th century, and now up till now, people resort to two types of struggle: nonviolent and armed struggle. The nonviolent struggle was the largest, although we might not call it nonviolent, we call it unarmed struggle, because when you talk unarmed, in a way, it gives power to the people. And because many times the word nonviolence is misused by the power to be or the great powers in the world, And this is, we see
it has been throughout
and
history.
we see it in double standard, in dealing with Ukraine. The world sent weapons, difficult scenario there, but weapons, money, honey, for the people to resist the Russians. And here, if a Palestinian uses a stone, there is a prefix for us, either terrorists or extremists or fundamentalists. So for us, John, if it is
irony is strong.
To me, it's up to me. So I resort to nonviolence, and we are actively involved in nonviolence. We teach in schools, universities, and NGOs, and men's conference, young women, young men activism. And I think, to be frank with you, if we want to move forward from this deadlock to a better look, we need three dimensions of the struggle. And I call it struggle because no way at this moment that the oppressor will give us a carte blanche and say, okay, you are free. We need to struggle. No. So nonviolent struggle
that is not in the cards.
Oppressed, where we have active approach to get rid of being under occupation. This is the first thing. The Palestinians should continue in this road. The second, the pro-peace camp in Israel, pro-justice camp, despite it is a small, but it is a ray of hope for us, and they need to continue with their preventive approach of nonviolence to help their government get rid of being the occupier. And the third one is people like you, third party, you could say from community groups, NGOs, international NGOs, human rights groups, to governments, to empower the weak, but to bring the strong to their senses and not to their knees. I'm not interested to bring the Israeli to their knees. I'm interested to bring them to their senses, because what I want to celebrate life and not death. And this is a way, the three dimensions of the struggles. And when I talk about that, I think the international dimension is very important, because at this moment, we need international pressure on Israel to protect the Palestinian civil, people, and to protect us from this aggression and barbaric attack, as well as to help to keep the status quo of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Judaized every day, and Jerusalem is attacked every day, the holy places, the people. And Israel would like to claim Jerusalem exclusively, and this is not healthy. So the world involvement is very important. We saw the collective responsibility at work in ending the apartheid regime in South Africa and dismantling the
I wanted to
Berlin
ask about
Wall
that.
and ending the conflict in Northern Ireland. So we want the collective
Right.
responsibility, whether by governments and by people, NGOs, human rights organizations, to be successful in helping the Palestinian to be free, as well as to create another small sphere for peace, justice, and coexistence. Without that, we'll continue this conflict for ages to come, and from the time to time, we might have a truce. I tell you frankly, the atmosphere is
Right.
very poisoned at this moment. Palestinians at this
Hmm.
moment, some of them are hopeless, and many of them, and even helpless. And they will say, if we have a new prime minister in Palestine called Gandhi, Martin Luther King would be the president, Mother Teresa, the minister of social affairs, and so on, Israel will not withdraw from any inch in the West Bank. So they
Ah,
ask
okay.
for
So
international
let
community involvement. Sorry.
I see. No, no, no. I appreciate what you just said because so you're saying regardless of what you do, there will be Israelis of their own volition will not withdraw. I want to ask you to you mentioned three things in the struggle, three pieces of the struggle: internally, nonviolence resistance against the occupation. Uh, that's one camp. The second camp would be the people, Israelis inside Israel who could work against um, the occupation, who could work with their government to change their government
Like Yesh
to have
Gabul or
a more.
Women in Black,
There's many groups.
Israeli Committee
Yes, there's so
Against
many
House
groups.
Demolition, despite they are small in number,
Right.
but they are a ray of hope.
They're vocal. They are a ray of hope. And then also, then you mentioned the outside the community organizations, NGOs, whether it's Amnesty, could be U.S., could be the UN, could be the outside governments. However, so my question is, when I look at these three areas, I don't see progress in any of them. You know, I've been coming to that region. I first came in 1994. I was in Gaza in 94. I've been back 2004, 2008, and then many, many times since then. I've seen many groups inside Israel working for peace. I've seen many people, many Palestinians themselves, like yourself, working for nonviolent resistance. And I've seen a lot of outside agencies and a lot of the international community where the only place where I see progress personally is in, and it's slow, but it has been like the BDS movement and things happening outside of Israel and outside of Palestine, not with governments, but with an awareness raising among people around the world. There seems to be more concern, as slowly building as it is, in the outside world, that it seems to me it has to come from pressure
Exactly.
from the outside, because it doesn't feel like it's happening inside either of
Even if
your
it's not coming
areas.
from outside. I don't want to be seen as
No,
naive,
but
as if it
yes,
is working. No, it's not working. You know, if it is working, we couldn't see a very right wing government formed in Israel. And we're having two,
right.
two extreme
From the Israeli
ministers,
perspective, yeah.
among many others, and Netanyahu, you know, and with its oppressive approaches towards us, with their new laws, with their new, you know, for example, there is
No,
a silly
it's
law to
much
say
worse.
for Palestinians, if you want to be in love with someone from outside, you should inform the Israeli government in order to give her or him a permit to come to Palestine. Oh, come on. What is this kind of law? And people talk about Israel as the only democratic state in the whole Middle East. You know, such silly laws. Or I have been living here for many years as a family and as a Palestinian Christian. and I'm married to one person from the States, American, and I couldn't live with her since 1990. For 32 years, she is a visitor in my home. Every 3 to 6 months, I renew her visa. Look how much money, how much drain on my energy, on resources, on sanity, on not knowing the future. While in 1950, Israel has law called the law of return. Any person who claims his or her great-grandmother is Jewish could come on Aliyah to live in Palestine, Israel, regardless to his or her fiancé, without any restrictions. So I don't know what they call these. So I think our struggle.
I think they call that human rights abuses. I
This
think
is
what they
really
call that.
a very moderate term, you know. Some people call it racist,
I know.
call it
I'm just trying to find a word for it.
you know. And I know it is not going to change within a few years or a few months, but I think that's why we need to continue the struggle non-violently from my side. And according to you, and anyone is under occupation has the right to resist by all means, including armed struggle. But for me, as a person who believes in non-violence and unarmed struggle, I continue to that in this less traveled road.
Well, I wonder what there's certainly Palestinians living in Jenin, well, living everywhere in the West Bank, who must see your struggle, your nonviolent approach as one that has not worked. And is there pressure on you from other Palestinians to say, we've tried that for decades, we've gotten nowhere?
Are more pluralistic than anyone thinks. And we have diversity in our society.
Yeah.
As they said about Jews,
Yes.
Between two Jews there are 3 opinions. I will say between 2 Palestinians there are 5 opinions. You know, and you know, I wouldn't condemn any type of struggle, but I wouldn't condone it. You know, and I like to save lives rather to celebrate life rather than death, and we are tough on the system, soft on the people, and everyone has the right to struggle the way he or she. But if it is to me, it's up to me. So that's and you know, we look at this government as oppressive government, but also you know, there is opportunity in this government. I tell you frankly, when
in which government are you referring to, the Palestinian or the Israeli
government behavior and acts? Because the world will see the real behavior of such an aggressive government. Maybe look at the American Jewish community are not happy. Look at the Jewish Voices for Peace are not happy.
I know.
Look at the demonstrations in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. I don't know. Yes, I know Netanyahu will use a different way to let people rally after him. He wants to wage a war against Iran. He wants to say we are against the Palestinians. He wants to give a lot to the settlers. But in the long run, such approach will not help him or help the Israeli community or the Jewish community at large. Israel, yes, might have 8 million Jews.
They have,
or like that, but not all the Jews around the world. And you know, when we talk about occupation, does not demoralize me as Palestinian only. It demoralizes Jews and also to the world. Why United States is supporting Israel unconditionally? Why the tax money comes to Israel without any kind of accountability?
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, but honestly, I mean, it's as if Israel is just another base for us, you know. I mean, there's so many reasons why, but the arms sales and you know, the weapons we have there. There's many reasons why we continue to overlook the abuses in Palestine to support Israel. It's not only because Americans support Israel, it's because Americans support Americans, and they see that in at least the government, and they see that as an
And I
assistance
really
to their
value the
presence
youth
in the area.
movement in America and the prophetic voices in the American people. And I think we need to work with them to help the world, especially in the West, to get rid of being guilty. And they might help Israel to get rid of being the victim mentality. So it is really a collective responsibility.
This is a long
Again,
road.
should
Yeah.
be acted to move forward. Otherwise, we'll be slaves to our future.
Let me ask you, the other night, just 2 nights ago, I heard, I think, Jonathan how do you pronounce his name? Kutab. He wrote a book called Beyond the Two-State Solution. He's a Palestinian. Kutab. How do you do
Yes,
it?
yes, Kutab, I
Kutab?
know.
You're not familiar with him? Okay. Yes. So he wrote this book Beyond, and I asked, so I was on a Zoom conversation. He was talking about this book Beyond the Two-State Solution. And I asked him if he has hope, because it looks kind of hopeless sometimes. You've been living there. I don't know how old you are, but your entire life, this has been the situation you've been in. So I'm sure it must be difficult to hold on to hope. And I'm wondering if you do, if your children do, and if you're able to pass hope along, if you take the long view, because the short view is not hopeful, but the long view,
I believe
hopefully,
we cannot
is.
live without hope. And we cannot live without faith. Hope and faith are two faces of the same value. And for me, hope is a form of non-violent struggle. To be enhancing the hope of people is part of the struggle. And, as Martin Luther King says, no injustice will last forever. There is inevitability to end this oppression, this occupation. And one person defines diplomacy is as the art of delaying the inevitable. And Israel is delaying the inevitable. Look at this. Demographically, we talk about Palestinians and Israeli Jews are equal, living in Israel, Palestine, and I'm talking about demography. They couldn't get rid of us. They couldn't really. Could be some Palestinians now, they talk about a transfer, that this government will again have transfer against us. Will this?
Well, that would be met with a lot of derision around the world if that were to be
the
attempted.
free world allow it. So again, this is part of the hope that the demographic struggle is very important. Second, I am a student of history. How we say South Africa moving from apartheid to now, although it is not absolute justice, how the Republicans and the conservative in Northern Ireland share the government, how Berlin fell down, no matter how long the occupation will be, they couldn't control us forever. And if Israel wants to live in this Middle East, they should have good relationship with the others who are surrounding us. Yes, Israel approaching the Arab regimes in a fake approach, in a fake rapprochement, thinking that if they have signed a treaty with the Arab leaders, they will have good relationship with the people. And we saw in the Qatar World Cup Mondial how Israel was isolated.
It's not the case.
And so the Arab masses will not. Yes, the Arabs and the Muslims and the Palestinians and those who are oppressed in bad situation now. But life is not 10 years, not 100 years. Yes, I like to see change here. And that's why I cling to hope. I see hope in my kids, despite what happened to their mothers, to their mother here. They decide to finish their education and to come back. They decide that this is their home. Yes, they have the freedom to live in the States, but they wanted in the long run to be here. I see hope in the eyes of the kids, in the eyes of the youth, in the eyes of the women. I see also in the international awareness approach that, they don't like injustice to continue. And there are two powers, whether we like it or not. The multinational corporations supported by the power to be, and the second one is the power of the people. At this moment, the power of the people is not at its peak, but who knows? Things might change. What will happen after Ukraine? You think the world will be silent?
Change.
The destruction of Europe, the destruction of Ukraine, the threat of nuclear war. Do you think people will pass over it in a few years without thinking differently? I think there will be some change. And this is where I have hope, where I have faith that at the end, no one would like to see slaves or to be a slave, except those who are dealing with arms, who would like to have cheap oil, who would like to work with multinational corporations without any ethics or morality, but they are minority, but they make a lot of noise and they make a lot of profit based on the favor of others.
And they have a lot of power. They have a lot of power. But resistance has power as well. We're getting toward the end of our time, but would you do this again? Would you live this life again in the same way if you were to start WIAM, if you were to consider taking on something so intractable, so difficult as nonviolence in the most, I don't want to say violent neighborhood, but the most conflicted neighborhood in the world? You're taking on probably the hardest thing that there is. I'm living it. The most difficult to achieve. Huh?
And I have lived, and life is a matter of choices.
Yeah.
And I chose this way.
And you would choose it again?
I will continue because it is a strong belief that human lives are sanctified, are holy, are sacred. Any loss of any person is a loss of humanity. As John Donne says, don't ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So in a way or another, it is a way of choice. I tell you frankly, I have a choice to go to the States and live there.
I was wondering, you could live there.
I decided to have this choice, and I have very encouraging wife, despite it costs us a lot to have this kind of life. It costs us a lot of pain, a lot of stress, but money. But we decide to continue with it. And I tell you, we are not going to leave. Whatever the power, whether the Grinch will steal lives, but we will continue to live it because I want to celebrate life. And the most important thing, I like to celebrate it with others. And for me, the other is a sister or brother. And I know that it is crazy to say such things after such a bloody massacre in Jenin, but many Palestinians are talking about that. And even the PLO had a meeting yesterday or the day before, and they emphasize the unarmed struggle. Yes, in the leadership, and they say, let us stop the coordination with the authority, with the Israeli occupation, and so on. So people, but the world is not giving the Palestinians the opportunity to see their freedom, to live, to be in telling the world about their story. Yes, look what is happening. I was in different places in the world in the last few months where my wife was a prisoner here. She is not allowed to go to Jerusalem. She was not allowed to go to Area C. She was not allowed to drive a yellow license car. She was not allowed to go and come freely from the Lid airport, Tel Aviv airport. But she has taken the opportunity to stay here. So, it is really a life.
It's a choice. It's a choice. It's a non-resistant choice. I mean,
Yes.
a
So it
nonviolent
is,
resistance. I'm sorry.
again,
Yes,
uh,
her being.
no matter what is happening, I think, as we say, the dawn is coming. No matter how long the darkness of the night, the dawn will come. So,
Tell me how people can help you best. First of all, your doors are open.
yes,
Anyone can come and visit you, right? And I would encourage everyone to do it. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I've brought many groups, both youth and teenagers and older people to WEAM, to Bethlehem. And you are the one person and the one center that everyone asks about. And I just got a text yesterday from my sister who was there many years ago. And she said, what was that place that we visited in Bethlehem? What's happening? So something that you have done, your voice for peace in the face of so much violence and bloodshed and difficulty, it resonates. And every single person of all the ones that we went to see anywhere in Israel, we see settlers, we go to refugee camps. Everyone remembers your voice because it's always been a comfort to know that there's someone who carries on sort of that Gandhi-esque approach to life, and it's hard. And so I would encourage people to come and visit you because
as we say,
you provide so
we
much
have a sign
direction and
on our center says, "Come, see, reflect, and act." Come and see and witness, reflect, and act. Yes.
Is that the best way people can help you?
Coming, visit, and what we offer using the stones figure. We love them to see the holy stones, but also encourage them to meet the living stones and to be introduced to the rolling stones of the socio-economic political conditions. And we tell the world there is a room in the inn, and we are happy to help you arrange your program itinerary when you come and visit. And this is very important. And also, let me say, it is not only bad situation that we live in, but look, I was in the South Sudan a few months ago, and they elected me to be, with modesty, the I4 president of I4, International Fellowship of Reconciliation, where we are.
Wow.
50.
Congratulations. That's huge. I mean,
we are representing 50 countries. We have more than 74 affiliates, branches.
Wow.
And we are not looking only at the issue of Palestine to be free from the occupation. We want to work for justice everywhere. As Martin Luther King says, any injustice anywhere is a fringe on justice everywhere. So we talk about collective approach. We want to see an end to the Ukraine war. We want to see an end to the slavery of the people in Africa, to the oppression in Latin America. We are part of this global village. No man is an island. No woman is an island. We should together assume collective responsibility.
Thank you so much. I will put your information in the show notes about how to get in touch with you. Your website is the best way, I'm guessing. And I would just encourage everyone. We make it. It is dangerous at times, but if you're an American or European or someone traveling from outside of Israel, Palestine, it's very safe and it's very easy to visit. It's very powerful experience, and I encourage everyone
and we
to
have
go and
wonderful hospitality with tea and coffee, and we can read your
the best
fortune
food on the planet. Okay, it sounds like a deal, and I will come back and visit soon. Thank you so much, Zoughbi, for spending this time. I know it's a difficult time, and as it always is, but I appreciate it so much. And
Thank you,
Godspeed.
Deborah.
I wish you well. Wish you peace.